I'm Rory, and you are listening to Rory's Room, the podcast where we discuss anything and everything life throws at us. Once again, I'm sitting back at my desk with my 2 drinks, my Winter Wonderland Alani Nu, and my water bottle, which I will probably not touch until the episode is completely filmed and edited and I am severely dehydrated, but I will cross that bridge when we come to it. The kittens are approximately 4 weeks old now, and they're definitely a little bit crazy. Wizard is currently Spark's little op, going after her like he's a full-grown cat, and she's just letting him do it. If he wants to act like an adult, she's going to treat him like one and fight him like he is 10 times the size that he actually is. Midnight is usually off doing her own thing somewhere, probably getting into things that she shouldn't be and falling over, and if she's not doing that, she's more than likely sleeping in the corner. Right now, Storm is just moving around the room trying to familiarize herself with the territory and get used to the kittens, but she's definitely doing a lot better than she was last week. There is still an occasional hiss and bopping the cats down on their backs every now and then, but for the most part, she kind of just wants to be left alone, which is completely fair. Ever since she got older, she's really been kind of introverted, and if she's not playing occasionally, she's either sleeping in her hammock or her cat tree, or we have this little stroller that we like to push her around in outside, but ever since it's gotten a little bit colder, it's just been sitting in the closet, so she'll sometimes sleep in there as well. I had originally planned to record a self-love episode, but while I was writing an episode over the weekend, I realized that Thanksgiving is just coming up in a couple of days, and honestly, holiday episodes have always been some of my favorites. Cozy, comforting, and I feel like a bit nostalgic. I was always a big fan of Disney holiday specials like Good Luck Charlie, The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, and all that stuff, especially Ant Farm. Ant Farm was one of my favorite shows, especially the Halloween episode, peak television. And then of course there are classic specials like Charlie Brown the Great Pumpkin and Thanksgiving, and of course I wanted to create a holiday episode. I also feel like there is a big stereotype around Thanksgiving and the holiday, and it's almost as if you're not eating stuffing or turkey, you're not celebrating Thanksgiving, which is the wildest statement. We don't all come from the same background or family dynamic, so I don't think it's fair to assume that we should all be eating the same food. Also, obviously, people don't always like the same foods. For example, I don't really like turkey that much, so if there is a substitute like ham or something, I am definitely going to be taking that. Otherwise, I am a really big sides person, so often, instead of eating the big entree like turkey, I will be going after the potato salad and a lot of other stuff like that. One of my favorite sides growing up at parties, not necessarily Thanksgiving-esque, was the apple Snicker salad, which the name is very, very funny considering it is the farthest thing from a salad, but it was one of my favorite things ever. I think it's made with, obviously, apples and Snickers and possibly marshmallow fluff, which the only thing close to healthy in that is apples, but with all the sugar, it's pretty much canceled out. Thanksgiving looks different for everybody. For some, Thanksgiving may look like a big Pinterest board, and for others, you may be eating Triscuits alone in your room. But I really wanted to make this episode to break down what Thanksgiving can look like for anyone, whether you're celebrating it with family, friends, roommates, or even solo. I don't think Thanksgiving has to look a certain way, and I think that is a very big reminder that we have to consider moving into this holiday. Before we get into the icebreakers though, I wanted to clear up one little side note that my unofficial manager, Elaine, brought up to me last week. In the last episode, I mentioned the name Jacob, but I never really explained who he was. And although some of you may have gathered the context clues and understood who I was talking about, I figured I would clear up the confusion and state that Jacob is my boyfriend. So if you hear me talking about him or address him in any of these podcasts, just remember that. All right, so before we dive deep, let's start with some of our icebreakers. This week's podcast recommendation is the Whimsy Gossip podcast. Whimsy Gossip is a fantasy-focused podcast for book lovers, especially if you're into high fae content like A Court of Thorns and Roses or Crescent City. Valerie and Taylor host Whimsy Gossip and bring on guests such as Leslie Hernandez, the host of the Starfall Fantasy Balls, Stephen Walker, who played Tamlin in some of their fan films, and Colin the Necromaker, a costume designer that designed some of the Akotar-style wings for their fan films as well. These fan films are self-funded and non-profit, but don't let that fool you. The quality is absolutely insane. One of my favorite adaptations that they have made is the most recent fan film of A Court of Thorns and Roses Chapter 65. Their casting is absolutely incredible, and not to mention their quality has grown substantially since they have started. One of my favorite castings has got to be Drew Hawley as the King of Hybern, because I feel like he adds a certain personality to the king that we haven't seen before, both in the few adaptations that we have and in the books. I feel like in the books he is meant to be this aggressor, and Drew really adds a personality and motivation behind this. That doesn't mean that I don't think Sarah J. Maas did a really good job. I just think Drew Hawley really brings a light to the character that we never saw before. I'll leave links in the description if you would like to check out their content or even donate to them. On their website, they have a quote-unquote buy me a coffee form that you can fill out that allows you to donate to their fan films and podcasts, which, if you like their content, it can be especially helpful if you want to see more. However, if you do decide to check out this podcast, just be on the lookout for spoilers about A Court of Thorns and Roses, Throne of Glass, and Crescent City, as well as a lot of other fantasy books. I would highly recommend that you read these series before you begin, because for obvious reasons, they focus the entire podcast and fan films around these books, so unless you're just looking for some entertainment and don't plan on reading these books, I highly recommend you do so before you look into these podcasts. But if you have read the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, I highly recommend that you check them out as soon as you can, because they are one of the best adaptations that I have seen. I don't know, as a filmmaker, I am much more inclined to watch producers who actually do the work rather than artificial intelligence creating a movie. And lastly, the song of the week is I've Seen It by Olivia Dean. The song is only about 2 minutes long, but I can't stop replaying it. The tone is just so soft and intentional, and I absolutely love it. That being said, I am also a person that likes to replay their favorite song over and over again until they absolutely cannot anymore, so take with that what you will. I think although the song never actually states what it is about, if you listen closely, you can tell that it is talking about love. And jumping into our category for this week's episode, I am first going to talk about the stereotype of traditional Thanksgiving. When I first hear the word Thanksgiving or think about the holiday, I often picture a long table with a table runner down the middle, a giant turkey, and everyone eating until they pass out into that post-dinner comatose nap. It's all cozy in theory, but we all know that life rarely fits the Pinterest version. That being said, of course there are some exceptions. Some people do go all out for Thanksgiving, getting matching pajamas, themed decorations, and etc., but a lot of other people celebrate differently. Personally, I don't like turkey that much, so I usually stick to sides or ham, and honestly, it doesn't change the fact that it's Thanksgiving. Turkey is optional, despite what cultural stereotypes make you believe, so you don't necessarily have to eat the same stereotypical Thanksgiving foods as everyone else for it to still be considered a holiday. Some people also don't celebrate Thanksgiving, whether they don't like the history or the family doesn't get together, or work schedules. I mean, for example, essential workers like doctors don't necessarily get a confirmed day off for Thanksgiving. In fact, Thanksgiving and a lot of other holidays like Christmas and New Year's, for reasons I don't have to state, can be one of the busiest days of the year at the hospital. And for other people, Thanksgiving just doesn't feel like a holiday, so often it'll be used as a rest day or a self-care day or when people can run errands, etc., which is also okay. The reality of Thanksgiving is that it often comes with holiday stress. If you have ever hosted a party or a get-together or anything, you understand how difficult hosting can be. And I can only imagine how difficult it is to host a Thanksgiving for however many people you plan to invite. If you're hosting it for the entire family, you're more than likely going to be cooking for hours, and that cannot be easy. Not to mention, you have to prepare your home for your guests, manage them arriving while you are not done cooking, balance all of the activities, etc. And there's also a pressure for everything to be perfect, in my opinion. I always want things to look great, and more often than not, whenever I have people over, I am still kind of sweaty and working on stuff and wanting to touch up things, but that's just not how it is. And then there's the stereotypical experience where you come home to a politically charged dinner table and conversations about relationships, whether you have a partner, etc., etc., and that's never something someone looks forward to. I think it's also really important to, like I said before, understand that we don't all come from the same background, so we don't all have a healthy dynamic to celebrate too. A lot of us can feel caught up in old family dynamics like arguing and the hectic dinner table, comparing yourself to relatives, and the list goes on. And linking this to last week's episode, social media can definitely dampen these feelings of loneliness and comparing yourself to others, because as humans, we like to share our lives and what is going on during our holidays on social media. And if you don't have the idealized Thanksgiving experience, it can be really easy to compare yourself and your experience with other people. This can make you feel especially disconnected on holidays, especially if you don't have a healthy support system at home, and it can make you feel like your experience of Thanksgiving is not as valid as everyone else's, but that is a myth. However you choose to celebrate Thanksgiving, it's still Thanksgiving, regardless of if you celebrate it with a big family, your Friendsgiving with coworkers, or even alone. And it's really important to understand that what we do see online is not a reflection of what is actually happening. When we post on social media, we are often conveying the best parts of our holidays and what we want people to see. It's not what we are actually experiencing. So if you see people experiencing joy and getting lots of amazing gifts at Christmas during these times, you need to understand that it's not always perfect for them too. They are more than likely experiencing some sort of struggle as well, whether it be a loss or politically charged conversations or anything like that as well. The holidays can be especially hard too if you've experienced any sort of grief or loss, whether that be a death in the family or even if you just choose not to spend Thanksgiving with your family. Like the first few years that I didn't celebrate or didn't have contact with my family, it was kind of hard because I would go around seeing all these people celebrating with their brothers and sisters and their parents, and it made me realize that I didn't have that. Although it was by choice, and I know it was the best thing for me, but it still didn't make it any easier. But that's when your found family comes into play, and it's really important to be grateful for the community that you do have, even if it isn't blood. In my experience, found family and the friends that you make that are not blood are the people that are most important in my life. Of course, mixed emotions are normal too. You can feel grateful but also feel stressed for a variety of different reasons. And if you're a college student, this emotional roller coaster can definitely feel more intense than other times. For example, if you go home for the holidays and return after being away for so many different months, it can feel kind of weird. For some people, if you have a healthy support system at home, you can feel like a child again, and the moment you get home, it can be like a really nice break away from classes. But for other people, it can be a very uncomfortable experience if they don't have a good support system at home. Family members can start asking questions about whether you have a relationship or not, how your career is going, how your grades are going, and in the moment, it can just feel really, really stressful. During my sophomore year of college, I actually stayed on campus during the week of Thanksgiving break, and there was like no one there. And although it seemed sad in a way, it was actually pretty nice because I had a lot of time to reflect and do the things that I wanted to do while taking a break from my schoolwork, and it was very, very nice actually. I ended up running my first 5K and I guess PRing because I had never ran a 5K by choice. It wasn't an official 5K, it was just like a run around the neighborhood, but I still surprised myself and really felt grateful that I was able to run. However, some people staying on campus don't really have a choice, whether they don't have a car, they have to work, or they have other obligations. it can feel like Thanksgiving isn't even there, and that it's just kind of strange purgatory feeling that you're not celebrating. But I think during this time when you aren't able to go home, or if you just don't have a really good support system to go home to, I think it's really important that we emphasize our found relationships. In my experience, my found relationships and non-blood family are more important to me than my family that I'm actually related to, because they have proven that they want me in their life. Family dynamics can always complicate the holidays, so I think that's a really important thing to talk about. A lot of people actually take distance from their family during this time because regardless whether they have a unhealthy relationship with their family, it can be really, really hard to insert yourself into this environment. There's also a pressure to attend family gatherings, which tradition makes us feel obligated to be somewhere even when we don't want to. And I think it's really important that we understand our use of free will, and that sometimes it's just not the best thing for us to do to go to the dinner, especially if we don't have healthy relationships with our family, because I think it can be really easy, especially during this time, to fall back into old patterns like arguing, etc., without thinking. So setting boundaries is really, really important, whether you leave early or just don't go. Protecting your emotional space is above all very important, and you're not being selfish if you're setting boundaries. They're a necessary thing. That being said, it can be really easy to feel like you're being selfish and fall back into people pleasing, but I think you really need to reflect on these things and decide whether if the people you are celebrating with is a tone that you want to be celebrating with the rest of your life. In my experience, creating new traditions is another way to reclaim the holiday, because like I said, if you don't like the way that your family or friends are celebrating your holiday, it's okay to change that. Whether you decide to celebrate with yourself or some friends or found family, etc., you can change the way that you celebrate. I think Thanksgiving also has a stereotype that we have to be thankful for huge things on this holiday, which isn't always easy to do or realistic. Gratitude doesn't need to be deep or grand. It can be just appreciating small joys like a warm cup of coffee or a soft blanket, and recognizing these little wins or moments of peace matter just as much as the big gestures. And in order to help you feel grateful, I highly recommend that you stay off social media during this time. Of course, you can post some things or look at other people's things, but doing so can make you feel a little bit more inclined to compare your experience to theirs. So it's just kind of a decision that you have to make and some caution that you have to take. And sometimes gratitude is easiest when you can spend the holiday alone. Some people spend it alone because of work, like I said, distance, personal choice, etc. But making solo holidays meaningful can be very simple. Put on one of the nostalgic movies or shows that I was talking about, like Charlie Brown, order some of your favorite food, or cook a dish that you love, and create a cozy, peaceful environment that you can watch this movie and eat your meal in. And it's okay to celebrate alone too. It's not like you're doing Thanksgiving wrong, because there's no way to do Thanksgiving. Everyone's Thanksgiving looks different, like I said, because everyone's life looks different. So however you celebrate Thanksgiving, it is completely valid. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode. This episode may be shorter, but I do think it is just as equally important, especially during this holiday season. Make sure your loved ones feel appreciated during this time, whether it's just by calling them, seeing them in person, or giving them a hug. For now, I wish you a happy holiday season, and I will talk to you on Sunday for next week's episode. Bye!